So I'm sitting here booktube in my reading chair and beginning to read from the autumn 1935 edition of the colophon, volume of the colophon from autumn of 1935. And I've just read the first article in here, which has taught me some new information and brought a new mystery to light, at least for me. The topic is Mother Goose. Now, of course, I grew up on Mother Goose nursery rhymes. Mother Hubbard, who lived in a cupboard, and I think there were a few others that were popular in my childhood. But I never thought too much about Mother Goose. I remember an old videotape with an actor in a giant Mother Goose costume where they were making a sandwich, but of course that has very little to do with the actual Mother Goose nursery rhymes, which were apparently, possibly, published for the first time in 1719. But it's hard to say because the supposed 1719 edition has never been found and probably never will be found. But there's always a chance. There's always that chance of a mystery out there that someday somebody will be digging through, a lot of books somewhere, or an attic or a basement or a collection that hasn't been touched in decades or a century, and they'll come across the 1719 Mother Goose. But then there's the possibility that the 1719 Mother Goose does not exist, because that supposed 1719 Mother Goose published in Boston is based on family lore. According to the article that I just read by Codman Hillslop, Hislop? Hislop is the spelling of the last name. But he compiles some of the articles and research from the past couple hundred years when he had been writing in 1935. And says, and if you Google this, you'll find the same thing today in 2025, but many people believe that the character of Mother Goose is based on a woman in colonial Boston whose name was Goody Vergoose, who apparently had a large number of children, so many children she didn't know what to do, as the nursery rhyme says. And her son-in-law may have compiled these verses and published them, supposedly in Boston in 1719. But no one really, at least according to this article, no one really tried to trace the history of where those verses came from until almost 100 years later. And at that point, it was just family lore. And then by the end of the 19th century is when, I guess, lots of theories were flying about where the Mother Goose nursery rhymes originated. And there is a theory that they have nothing to do with Goody Vergoose or Boston or America at all, and they're translations from a French author. That was one theory that was thrown out there. But the author of this article in 1935, Codman Hillslop, seems to be in the camp of, yes, they were indeed published in Boston in 1719. And he goes through, various reasons, evidence for and against. One being that it's kind of doubtful that such a trivial work would have been allowed to be printed for children in Boston in 1719. And the coins that, are said to have cost 2 coppers. And someone else had thrown out, well, they weren't using copper coins. It would have been, English paper money or something like that. But he says, no, there were some coins floating around in colonial Boston in that time. But he ends it by noting that one of the Mother Goose rhymes says, Dr. Foster went to Gloucester in a shower of rain. He stepped in a puddle up to his middle and never went there again. And Elizabeth Vergoose, one of the family members, just happened to have a brother Richard Foster, who was a doctor. And there's a line that says, "Old Mother Hubbard went to the cupboard to fetch her poor dog a bone." Well, apparently the fair Gooses had some nearby neighbors who were named the Hubbards. And there's a couple of, little things like that that could be evidence, could be coincidences. Hard to say. I do like this theory, though, that there is a 1719 edition of those verses floating around out there somewhere that someone could potentially find someday. I like those little stories and the possibility that an important work of literature, about as important as a nursery rhyme could be, could someday be, unearthed in a first edition.